Hi, this is Manos Brilakis, and this is video 8.3.5 for the Manual of CTO Intervention. This video discusses what to do if a microcatheter does not cross through a collateral. Specifically, this refers to septal collaterals because for epicardials, one wants to be much more conservative. And this is the step where this is referring to. This is step number 6 of the retrograde approach. We got the guide wire through, but then the microcatheter fails to go through the septal collateral. There are two broad categories of techniques to use in this situation. The first one is trying to deliver the microcatheter through the collateral. The second one is giving up on the attempts to deliver the microcatheter and doing something else instead. So starting with the steps to deliver the microcatheter, 8 steps, the first step is to try to rotate the microcatheter. We typically first try to advance the microcatheter by pushing, but if this doesn't work, then sometimes we can rotate the microcatheter. Some microcatheters like the Corsair, Corsair XS, Turnpike, Turnpike LP, those microcatheters are torqueable and can be turned. To a lesser extent, we can turn other microcatheters like the Fine Cross. The second thing that can be done is to increase the support. And this is more often done by using a guide extension. This is an example of a retrograde guide, and this is a retrograde guide extension that helps deliver the retrograde microcatheter. Another option is to use the side branch anchor. Moving on to options 3, 4, and 5, this is changing the microcatheter. Either getting a new microcatheter or a different type of microcatheter, or potentially using a 135 instead of a 150 centimeter long microcatheter, which may transmit the torque a little bit easier. So these are the different types of microcatheters that can be used for CTO intervention. Specifically for retrograde, we're using the larger and the smaller single lumen microcatheters. So trying something else, for example, if we try first a Corsair and doesn't go, maybe we can try Collateral, which is lower profile microcatheter. And by trying something different or a new microcatheter can often resolve the problem and allow to deliver the microcatheter through the collateral vessel. Step number 6 is to dilate the collateral. Again, this is only for septals. We never dilate epicardial collaterals. Only the septals can be dilated, typically with a small balloon, 1.0 to 1.5 millimeter in diameter, very gentle inflations, 2 to 4 atmospheres. This is something we don't do very commonly. It can be a little traumatic for the collateral, but this remains an option when there is difficulty crossing septal collaterals. Once again, this is only for septals, never for epicardial. The next step is to do what's called the Antegrade anchoring. What this means is we have the retrograde wire through, and we actually are able to advance the retrograde wire next to an Antegrade wire and an Antegrade balloon. The Antegrade balloon is inflated, essentially pinning the retrograde wire against the wall of the vessel, and by doing that, the support is increased, and then quite often we're able to advance the retrograde microcatheter through. The last option is to exchange for a stiffer polymer jacket wire. This is typically reserved if we have crossed the collateral and microcatheter is very, very close to the distal end of the collateral and there's no significant tortuosity. So these are the options for actually delivering the microcatheter, but there are options that don't depend on delivering the microcatheter. The first option is to actually use the retrograde wire to cross into the proximal true lumen, which can happen especially when the occlusion is of short length. This is an example. We have an LAD CTO. We went retrograde through a septal from the right coronary artery, but we cannot advance the retrograde microcatheter all the way through. However, we were able to advance the retrograde wire because it was a short occlusion into the distal true lumen. And then we were able to snare the wire and then do successfully stenting. So sometimes for short occlusion, you can just cross from distal true to proximal true lumen with the retrograde guide wire. The second option is to use the retrograde wire as the marker for an Antegrade wire to cross. And this is an example. We have a retrograde wire, and now we're using this as the marker to direct our Antegrade equipment. This is an example of a case of a right coronary artery CTO, previous bypass patient. We were able to go retrograde through septal collateral, try different microcatheters, Caravel, Turnpike LP. We were unable to cross into the through the collateral into distal true lumen. But then we used the retrograde wire as a marker and advanced an Antegrade knuckle to the mid RCA. We did an attempt for re-entry in the vertical part of the RCA that was not successful. But then we advanced the knuckle more distally, and then we used the retrograde wire as a marker for the Stingray wire and an Antegrade wire to puncture, aiming for this retrograde wire, and this successfully crossed into the distal true lumen. So this is an example where the retrograde wire served as a marker of the location of the distal true lumen. And finally, what we can do is just abandon the plans to do retrograde through this collateral and try to use another collateral. This is an example of an RCA, blunt distal cup at the bifurcation of a large acute marginal. We went retrograde, but we were unable to deliver various microcatheters. And then what we did is we ended up giving up on it. We did use a more distal septal. And then this was much easier to cross with a regular microcatheter with a nice result. This is another example. This is an RCA CTO. We went retrograde using a SUO3 and successfully crossed into the distal true lumen. But despite crossing, then we were not able to go with a microcatheter. We went further down, tried another collateral, didn't work. We went even further down, and then we engaged a third septal, and this time we were able to advance the guide wire into the distal true lumen, and the Turnpike LP this time crossed quite easily all the way down into the PDA. So in septal collaterals, especially when we have multiple options, using a different collateral can allow successful passage of the microcatheter, as was done in this particular case. Actually leaving the initial wire in place can help direct the guide wire into different collaterals. So to summarize, if the retrograde microcatheter will not cross, we have options to help either deliver the microcatheter or abandon the attempts to deliver the microcatheter and then use the retrograde wire either as a marker or to cross from distal to proximal true lumen, or we just abandon this collateral altogether and go for another collateral. Thank you.